Hello, lads and lasses. Hey, if you like today's lesson, then become a cake decorator and only write I Heart Art on the cakes, no matter if they ask for happy birthday or happy anniversary or whatever, as this would really help spread the good word about my class. All right, today we're going to talk about Michelangelo. And so that's Michelangelo. He wears an orange mask and fights with nunchucks. No, wait. No, he's a guy, he's an artist that paints muscular figures. And his women that he paints are very manly. He painted the Sistine Chapel. He sculpted David. He sculpted the Pietà, all famous works of art. And then that's what Michelangelo actually looked like. So here's one of his early paintings. This is the Holy Family. That's Joseph and Mary and little baby Jesus. But look at Mary's arms. Don't those look a little bit muscular for a woman for you? That's very typical of Michelangelo. So as we go through and are looking at Michelangelo's figures, and he does a lot of figures, all of his figures have a very overt strength to them, and especially the women. This is one of his all-time favorite sculptures, and that's the sculpture there in the middle of Mary and Jesus. It's called Pietà, and it's the scene where uh, Jesus has died on the cross and he's come off the cross, and she's lamenting his death, and so she's feeling very sad. Uh, One of the interesting things about this sculpture is that they've measured him and they've measured her, and he's about 6'3" or 6'5". But they've measured her, and if she were to stand up, she would be about 7'5", I think, was the height for her. So that's one of the oddities or odd things about the scale on this sculpture. However, but if you look up close at it, it is really quite beautiful and at how smooth this sculpture is. And look at the folds that are in the fabric. It really does look like fabric. And the stone, which is very strong and sturdy, looks very delicate. Another one of his all-time famous sculptures is the statue of David. Now, this is the same David as David and Goliath. And if you think back to Donatello's David, that looked very effeminate, this David looks very strong and masculine. And this looks like a David of about 18 years, 20 years old. Anyways, this sculpture is 18 feet tall. It's sculpted from one block of stone, which is super rare for a sculpture of that size. Usually, sculptures that are tall are sculpted out of multiple blocks of stone. But, anyways, when you go and look at it, this is what it looks like. So, David, this is before his fight with Goliath. And what he's holding with his left hand is the sling. And you can see the sling across his back that comes down into the rock that he's holding with his right hand. Also notice that he's looking towards his left. And there's a Christian reason for that, is that God protects your right, so then all you have to worry about is what's on your left. He has a very determined look on his face because he's facing his enemy. A very strong hand, but a great sculpture nonetheless. A very athletic build and very strong, very powerful. A wonderful, famous sculpture. All right, another of his famous sculptures is the sculpture of Moses. Well, and this is the tomb of some pope right here. So if you look this is Moses right here, and right here is a tomb. There's actually a dead person inside of that. That's their casket. And the casket was all sculpted by Michelangelo. In fact, Michelangelo sculpted all of this. There's a close up of Moses. Now, one of the things I think is interesting about this sculpture is how twisted the beard is, and that adds a little bit of dynamic action to this sculpture. Even though he's sitting there, and sitting is a stoic activity, but the how the beard is twisted makes it more dynamic. And then if you look closely at him, you notice there's horns on his head, and I don't remember Moses ever having horns. And those aren't really horns. Those are meant to be beams of light coming out of his head, which I think is an odd thing to sculpt out of stone. But so when you ever see the sculpture in the future, know that those aren't horns. Those are beams of light. And that's one of the sculptures that's next to it. And he sculpted other tombs for other famous people as well. And so here's uh, uh, a couple of tombs. So there in this casket, all of this was sculpted by Michelangelo. There it is. And so there's three figures. The figure up top is the person who is inside the casket, and then the two people that are on the left and the right represent their allegories. So they might represent nighttime and morning, or here's a close up of the figure. And on the other side, there's another tomb. And yes, there's a dead person inside of this casket. And here's a couple more allegories, and then a sculpture of the figure of the person that is inside that tomb. Beautifully sculpted figures. And not only was Michelangelo a painter and a sculptor, but he was also an architect. And so these are some of his architectural drawings that he designed. And so that dome that you see there was designed by Michelangelo. And that's the dome that's on top of St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican in Rome. There's a better photograph of it. When you go inside, that's the dome. And this right here, this sculpture in the lower left-hand part of this photograph, that is done by Bernini, and we're going to look at him when we study Baroque art. And not only did he design that dome, but he also designed this uh, plaza right here. This design is made by Michelangelo. And then when you go and visit it, you're actually standing on top of a Michelangelo work of art. And he designed this building right here. So once again, Michelangelo, not only a great painter, a great sculptor, and he was also a great architect. Here's some of the scenes or the views inside the building. He designed that staircase. All right, so what you're looking at right now is the map of the Vatican City. And the Vatican City is the smallest country in the world. And in fact, there are no births in the Vatican City. And in fact, Vatican City is a city inside of Rome. So it's a city within a city. And basically, it's the headquarters for the Catholic Church. So the Pope lives here. All the bishops of the Catholic Church live here, and that's what goes on here. Now, I want to direct your attention to that building right there, the Sistine Chapel. That's what it looks like on the outside. Not very interesting on the outside, but it's what's on the inside that is so interesting. And this is a photograph of the line that you have to stand in order to get into the Sistine Chapel. Um, and I've heard that the line can last up to 4 hours long. So uh, if you go to Rome and you visit the Sistine Chapel, just be prepared for a long wait. All right, so this little comic right here tells the story of how the Sistine Chapel was painted. Before Michelangelo painted it, it already had a paint job on the ceiling, and it was painted blue with yellow stars on it. Um, Michelangelo was commissioned by the Pope. So this guy right here on the left, that is the Pope, And this guy right here on the right, that is Michelangelo. Uh, the Pope asked Michelangelo to paint something on the ceiling. This is Michelangelo showing the Pope the plan for what he's going to paint on the ceiling. And Michelangelo used apprentices to help him. So this image up at the top is a group of apprentices helping Michelangelo paint the ceiling. So they're putting on a fresh coat of plaster, and these guys are drawing the pictures, and then Michelangelo would paint the pictures. But he had lots of difficulties, and one of the difficulties was moisture kept seeping through the painting that he painted on, and that was a problem. Another problem was that Michelangelo had anger management issues, and the Pope had anger management issues, and the two of them were constantly fighting with each other. And it took Michelangelo 4 years to paint the picture, and sometimes the Pope would get impatient, and but Michelangelo said it's a work of art. You have to, you can't rush it. But once he finished it, um, everybody loved it, and they all came to admire this wonderful, beautiful work of art. So here is an illustration showing how Michelangelo painted this ceiling. Back here in the background on the ceiling, you can see the blue ceiling with the yellow stars. And then this is the scaffolding. So he would climb up the ladders and stairs that he built out of wood. And then he built platforms where he could stand up and paint on the ceiling. And then, so that's the entrance into the Sistine Chapel. So people enter through that door, and here the ceiling is all prepared or painted by Michelangelo. Now on the walls, all that is stuff painted by other people. There's a view of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and then there's a view of the back wall. So when you enter, you are facing this back wall. And that painting right there is also painted by Michelangelo. So here is a map of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. So I'm going to point out a few things to you. And like all of this is labeled all over here. All right, so in this little section right here is a painting, and all of these images in the center all come from the book of Genesis. So these darker green labels are from the creation of the world from Genesis. And then these lighter green areas are from other parts of Genesis. So this little section right here is the separation of the light from the darkness. And this picture right here is the creation of the sun and moon. And then that's the separation of land and water. And that's the creation of Adam. That's the creation of Eve. That's the original sin. That's the sacrifice of Noah. And that's the flood. And that's the drunkenness of Noah. All right, so let's take a look at a little bit closer. So this is the separation of light from the darkness. So it's as if we're looking up at God and seeing his underside and then watching him separate light and dark. And this is the creation of the sun and the moon. And I found this meme. I don't know if it's in poor taste or anything, but I won't read it out loud. You can read it for yourself. I thought it was funny. I put it in here. All right, and this is the separation of land and water. And this is the image you've probably seen before. This is called the creation of Adam. And so on the right is God with angels reaching out to touch the finger of Adam, and Adam is reaching out to touch the finger of God. And if you look real closely, there's just a little bit of space between God and Adam. And so either God has just given life to Adam or is just about to give life to Adam. A very, very famous painting. You've probably seen it before. And the internet is full of uh, uh, jokes and parodies about it. However, this one right here is not a parody. They have studied this shape of God and Adam, and the shape of God creates exactly the cross section of a brain. So, did Michelangelo do that on purpose, or is that by accident, or I don't know. But I've seen, you've seen jokes online about this. He's serving him pizza, and this is what happens if you eat too much McDonald's, and finger pointing, creation of dog, God's playing pool. This is on this is actually on a wall next to an elevator. Paying for your food at a drive-through. All right, and then the next one is the creation of Eve. And so, according to Genesis, I think Eve comes from Adam's rib. So she's coming out of the rib of Adam. The original sin is when the snake gave the apple to Eve. They were forbidden to eat the fruit, and Eve took the apple from the snake and ate it. And so then they were cast out of the Garden of Eden. So here the snake is represented as it's almost like a mermaid snake or a mer snake, where the top half is the torso of a human, and then the bottom half is a snake. And then the sacrifice of Noah. I was reading about this, and I think this is supposed to happen after the flood. That after they reached dry land, they sacrificed animals to appease God. And then there's the flood. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And so all the wicked people drowned except for the family of Noah. And then the drunkenness of Adam, or the drunkenness of Noah. I read the story, and Noah's sons saw him naked and drunk and like asleep, and so they put a blanket over him. Uh, so I don't know if there was anything more to that story or not. All right, so we've looked at the center panels, the story of Genesis. Now there's other things that are painted on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and that is all of the what do they call them? The Sibyls and the prophets. These are all the people that predicted Christ, and so these are figures that are painted all the way around. And so here's one here. Again, with Michelangelo, this is one of my favorite paintings by Michelangelo right here. She's got such a beautiful face, but look at those arms. Those are like massive arms for a woman. Here's another one. A woman with a very muscular back. Here's an old lady, and she has like the arms of a gorilla. Massive. Here's a dude. He doesn't look as formidable as the women do. And here's another woman. Beautiful face, but really huge, big arms. And then in the corners of the chapel, there are 4 stories from the Bible. And one of those stories is the brazen serpents. Uh, this is when Noah was leading the Israelites out of slavery and through the desert. And all they would do is complain and bicker and, complain. And so God sent serpents after them to annoy them, to get them to stop complaining. And then God told Noah to put a staff in the ground and had like a bronze serpent on it. And so if you looked at the serpent that Moses put in the ground, that staff, that the snakes would leave you alone, and whatever bites you had would heal up. All right. Well, it looks like I just told that story. All right. Looks like I got my yeah, I'll have to fix that in editing. Hmm. All right. This is Haman, the punishment of Haman. So it's not the brazen serpent. But the story of Haman is he tried to trick the king into killing a bunch of innocent Jews, but they discovered his plot, and he was tied to a scaffolding to die. And so that's what it looks like right there. And Judith and Holofernes, I told you the story before, but Judith was a beautiful Christian, and Holofernes was a Roman general who was doing bad things to Christians. And he was planning on attacking the village where Judith grew up. Now, Holofernes was in love with Judith, even though she was a Christian and he was a Roman. She was very beautiful and he was in love with her. So she pretended to love him back. And one night, when he became very drunk and passed out, she snuck into his tent and cut off his head. So that is Judith and Holofernes. Well, Judith with the head of Holofernes, and in the background, that's the headless Holofernes on his bed. And then with on the other one is David and Goliath, and that's David cutting the head off of Goliath. All right, and then on the other parts of the Sistine Chapel ceiling are is the family and ancestors of Christ, and they are painted around these windows and yeah, and above the windows. And then around all of these stories from the Bible, there are these figures called the ignudi, and they're just decorative only. They don't have any kind of story or anything. And what I like about these figures is very dynamic. They have interesting poses, and they're muscular and they're twisted around. That's what I like about them. Very interesting. And then on some of the stories, there are these medallions, and the medallions tell different stories. So here's a list of the stories they tell. I'm not going to go into any kind of detail about the stories, but when you look closely, you can see the images on there, and that's what the stories are, or that's what the medallions are telling. They're telling the stories that I just listed there a couple slides ago. Now, the Pope was so impressed with the ceiling that he again commissioned Michelangelo to paint the back wall of the Sistine Chapel. So Michelangelo painted the second coming of Christ, or the Judgment Day. So in the middle up here, that is Christ with his mom, Mary, and he has one arm up and he is judging everybody. Down here at the bottom, on the bottom left, this is earth, and on the bottom right, this is hell. And on earth, all the dead are coming out of the graves, like the dead are coming back alive again. And on the left side is, or especially right here, are angels pulling people up to heaven. And on the right side, over around just above hell, are demons pulling people down into hell. And then all of this at the top is heaven. So there's a view of what it would look like when you're in there with other tourists. There's a view of the Sistine Chapel ceiling a little bit closer. And then here are some details. Again, look at the women. Look how strong their arms are and their shoulders are. Very, very muscular. This is Earth, and these are the dead coming back to life. So people are coming out of their graves. You can see skulls and skeletons. And then here at the top are angels pulling people up to heaven, dead coming out of the grounds. Over here on the right is hell. Now, this is a boat right here, and this is the river. This is the river that separates uh, earth and hell. And there's another river inside of hell called Styx, but I don't think this is it. And this guy right here, his name is Acheron, and he is hitting the people. He's beating the people that because he's ferrying them from land into hell, and they don't want to get off the boat because they don't want to go to hell. So he's beating them to get them off the boat. This guy right here with the snake around him, that's King Midas. And he judges, or it could be King Minos or Midas, but he judges everybody. And however many times his tail wraps around his body, that's the level of hell that you will be sent to. And in the Catholic view in the 1500s, hell had nine realms, nine circles. And so if he wrapped his tail around you 5 times, he went to the fifth circle of hell, and so on. All right, now the Sistine Chapel was cleaned back in the 1990s, and before that, it looked very brown. So this is an image of the Sistine Chapel before they cleaned it, and you can see like these lines right here, and that's part of the fresco process where you paint on it one day, and then you paint on it another day, and it kind of makes a line between in the painting. Anyways, the problem with the Sistine Chapel was that they hold church services in it. And the church services use candles. And when you blow out a candle, it creates smoke. And the smoke turns into soot that attaches itself to walls and ceilings. So what we're looking at is about 500 years of soot on top of the painting. Now, when um, they cleaned all that soot off. But as they were cleaning it, they realized that some of the paint on the Sistine Chapel ceiling and wall was not painted by Michelangelo. It was painted by somebody else. So when they cleaned it, they also cleaned off other people's paintings. And I'm going to show you an example of that right here. So notice this guy right here. All right, he's basically naked, but he has a piece of fabric covering up a very embarrassing part of his body. And then when they cleaned it, they took off that paint. But this guy right here in the lower left, he still has his fabric on. And so what happened was they realized that that paint that was on there covering this guy was not painted by Michelangelo, but this one was. Somebody had painted over the Michelangelo painting to cover up his buttocks. And the reason for that would obviously be, you don't want to have a bunch of naked people inside a church, but it's art. All right, here's a close up of one guy that was painted by Michelangelo, and here's another woman with big, massive arms. And then this guy right here, look at the look on his face and look at his expression. He learned that he's just been sentenced to go to hell for all eternity, and these are demons dragging at him, pulling him down to hell. And then this guy right here, do you see this empty skin? Here's a guy that's holding an empty skin, and that empty skin is Michelangelo himself. He painted himself as empty skin going down to hell. And then here's a photograph of people cleaning the Sistine Chapel ceiling. And then here's like before the restoration and then after the restoration. Before the restoration, everybody thought that the Sistine Chapel ceiling was all painted in browns, and low key colors. But it turns out that he painted with very bright colors. And here again is before they cleaned it, and then here's after they cleaned it. I found this joke and I thought it was funny. And then here's Michelangelo pretending to be Michelangelo. All right, and that's it for Michelangelo, and that's it for Renaissance. And I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you thought it was fun. And I will see you guys next time.
All right, that's it for today. And until next time, be a little art factory.